Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. I am honored to be among such distinguished scholars and grateful for the opportunity to be back in Chicago. As you heard, I completed my graduate studies here at the University of Illinois at Chicago in the 90s, and that is where I was introduced to immersive virtual reality. The Cave, we heard about the Cave before, or a cave. The Cave was invented here, and I was here at the time when it was invented in 1992. So I'm very fortunate and privileged to have that experience, which I have taken on, and I'm using this. This is my field of research and practice. So I will talk to you today. I will present a few examples of work that I've carried out in the past few years, exploring the application of digital technologies from mobile phones all the way to more sophisticated, immersive, extended reality systems, with the purpose of exhibiting cultural heritage to a broader public and for informal education purposes. A little bit about the background, my background in this domain of applying digital technologies in education, but mostly in formal education and archaeology and cultural heritage. In the 90s, when I moved back to Greece, I left Chicago and moved back to Greece in 1998, I started the virtual reality department at this foundation of the Hellenic World. There is a cultural center there. It operates a cultural center called Hellenic Cosmos. And back then, we had about 300 visitors per day, 95% of which were children, school children coming, visiting with their schools. So we installed virtual reality exhibits that were very high-tech at the time, but not very practical in achieving this visitor flow, the crowd flow that is very important for a museum to operate. We installed a cave system. You can see some images. These are from, it was installed in 1999, and visitors would come in and see reconstructions of ancient cities, Greek cities and objects. The museum or the cultural center doesn't have its own collection of authentic artifacts, so it's mostly operates as an educational center, with, of course, its collection being inspired of Greek history and sites and architecture. So in that sense, the emphasis of the work at that time was on the accurate digital reconstruction of ancient sites and objects. And this emphasis exists in general in the work of digital archaeology for the past few years, decades, I would say. So the focus is on fidelity, on the accurate virtual reconstruction, and then mostly didactic walkthroughs to view these reconstructions when it comes to the broad public. And of course, this is very important. It's a very important technology, ideal, I would say, for the exhibition of archaeological content to a broader public, because of course you represent sites and objects that may not exist anymore, that may not be accessible easily, or far difficult, or it's dangerous to actually go and visit them. They're fragile and they require preservation and so on. So VR is ideal in that sense. Of course, it's also, though, a challenging task to make these accurate virtual reconstructions because one has to handle a great amount of archaeological data and also deal with the presentation of a very high polygon, as we say, large scale, I would say, models that have to be viewed in real time. So this is quite challenging, and this is why for a number of years, for decades, research in this domain has emphasized the fidelity and the accuracy, at the same time, the speed for the reconstruction to be viewable by a broader public. Nowadays, the hype of surrounding the metaverse term, there's new interest in virtual reality, of course, with systems that are cheaper, more accessible. One can buy a head-mounted display for a few $100s, $300, $400, I think, and do something at home. You don't need to go to a cave. But of course, because of this new interest, the reconstructions are evolving. There's interest in making them more impressive, high quality graphics, fidelity, accuracy, and representation, and so on. And at the same time, there are concerns voiced by scholars and by the broad public as well about how far one should or can replace reality with a virtual reconstruction of the authentic object or space. So we argue that the future will not be exclusively virtual, and that's the kind of work I'm trying to do with my team, but a hybrid future, which integrates physical and virtual, and creating hybrid experiences is what we are trying to and we're striving for. The definition of hybrid is something that comes from the crossing of dissimilar things or the combination of different cultures and traditions. But in practice, this means integrating analog and digital. In our case, it means that the physical space is highlighted, it's complemented, it's expanded through the coexistence with the digital, and that tangible objects are included and take on a leading role in the digital experiences of visitors. So this is what we call creating a hybrid reality. And we can do this with many different technologies, from the nowadays simple mobile phones to more sophisticated technologies like virtual reality and extended reality. Now, we are striving, in essence, when talking about these hybrid experiences, to keep in close proximity to the original site, whether that's in situ or near the object, or if that's not possible, the site or the object, to incorporate the objects in some ways, so as to create this to keep this aura of authenticity. But we adopt this broader definition of hybrid experience. Embodied interaction, we feel, is also part of this definition. One can interact with machines in various ways, but it's not only through language or touching on a keyboard. It can be also through the body. And we strive for this personal physical relation with tangible objects and multiple senses. So I will show you some examples in a bit, but I'd like to also say that in our work we leverage this hybrid definition to explore what it means to create meaningful and meaning-making experiences for visitors, and that's what our goal is. So we're extending our definition of hybridity with these concepts here, augmenting the objects or the sites with interpretation, telling a story, and here's a thread that comes from all the presentations we heard before the break. The storytelling aspect is very critical and essential in what we're doing. And what we're trying to achieve is this perspective taking and this historical empathy on behalf of our visitors, but in a way that we can resonate with their lives today. We don't want them to understand the past and learn facts about the past only. We want them to see how their lives today connect to the past, what one can learn from it. And so cognition, in that sense, in our work, we view cognition, our educational aspect, comes through this embodied approach, so an active approach to cognition. So let's see some examples. I'm starting with work that we did in 2011, 2011 to 2014 at the Acropolis Museum, where we wanted to explore exactly this storytelling approach. So instead of an object-oriented, object-central, let's say, tour of the museum, we considered this narrative-based tour of the museum using mobile devices. Now this and all the other examples that I will show are European-funded research projects, so the equivalent of the NSF, the National Science Foundation here. The European Commission funds research projects in technology, so all of these are projects that require at least 3 countries to be represented, European countries, and several different types of institutions, universities, research centers, companies. So usually successful proposals, they have to have at least these requirements. This is a gallery in the Acropolis Museum. It's the Archaic Gallery. And we created stories that had a plot, a beginning, middle, and end, characters who spoke to you. And we tried to minimize the graphics on the screen. So they're audio heavy. Visitors wear headphones, and they move around the museum following the story of a person who may have lived in the past, or a fictional person, or a hero like Theseus, for example, from mythology. These stories are personalized to their tastes and adaptive to visitors' interests. So we had also some augmented reality activities in these stories. And these activities allowed visitors to focus on details. For example, here you see the original object. It's the statue there, the sculpture. And when you raise your tablet, you see on the screen the colored version as it was 2,500 years ago. And this is the result of the research that the archaeologists in the Acropolis Museum have done. And they saw through that research various details that they highlight, but in a narrative, in a story sense. So there are also ways to look at parts of, let's say, the earrings and so on in the story. What we learned from this project, I'm going very quickly through these, so you'll get a glimpse of the different work to date. But what we learned from this project, and we took forward in the projects that followed, we evaluated this with more than 50 visitors in 2012 to 2014, and we saw that what they appreciated the most is the playfulness of the experience, finding around the objects, and the story had had a humorous approach and provoked their curiosity. And you see how the tablet here is set aside, and they're actually looking at the object itself, or the objects. So the stories try to disappear the technology, to make it go to the background, and have them look at details on the objects that were related to the story itself. The character, for example, in this particular story, with this particular object, was a person, a woman who existed, and she made this offering to Goddess Athena, and her name, Melissae, is inscribed on the object. So this is towards the end of the experience, and the visitors really had this amazing moment of eureka, and thinking that, oh, there was a woman who really actually did exist then. And there's a fictional story that is set on top of this, but based on real facts, historical and archaeological facts. The other thing we learned is that a social and participatory experience is very much valued. Of course, most visitors, we know this, do not want to go to a museum alone. They prefer to go with their family, friends, etc. We had designed this experience as a single user experience. So in our next project, the Emotive project, we worked on group experiences, and we tried to see how it is to involve these kinds of technologies, to involve more people who work together in these kinds of technologies. So in Emotive, this ran from 2016 to 2019, this project. We have several sites. One of them is the ancient Agora of Athens. And here we took the storytelling concept to the next level and introduced interactive storytelling. And what this means, and this is the site of the ancient agora. It's an outdoor experience, so you walk around the actual site in situ. But you follow the story of a slave who was back there in classical Athens, ready to go to the agora and shop for the household. And you are the alter ego of the slave, so you make decisions for him. He thinks aloud, and you have to make decisions at various points on the actual site, the archaeological site, and in the story as it unfolds. So you decide whether he will take his amulet with or not. You decide if he will go to the fishmongers or to the hairdressers first. And depending on that, you are directed at a different part of the site, but you also control the outcome of the story. So it has branches, it's a branching narrative, and there are 7 different endings in this case. So you can go back as a visitor again and again and do this story, but make different choices and have a different experience around the site. Another experience at the ancient agora is this emotion speaking, because we're thinking of storytelling that creates an emotive response, an emotional engagement. And here, we're introducing this concept of tangibility. So we wanted something tangible. Of course, you can't touch these objects. They're 2,000 years old behind glass cases. But it doesn't really matter as long as there's one even simple, tangible approach that we wanted to explore, and we started to explore in this case. So here you see visitors who wear this cardboard, let's say, necklace made out of cardboard. It has 8 sides, and each side has an emotion inscribed on it and a color that comes with it. And they touch their again, headphones, very simple, no graphics almost on the screen. They touch the side that they prefer, the emotion that they choose, in front of a glass case like this, which is a glass case that you would go by and not really pay attention to. It has some objects in there. They're, of course, very old, but nobody really understands what the connection is between them. There are some nails, and some little pots and that vase, kylix. But what this glass case is about it's about Socrates. So Socrates is a very famous ancient philosopher. Everybody knows him. And the idea was to try to make them look at this glass case and these objects in a different way. So I'll show you a little video. So you can understand how this worked. So the visitor wears the tangible necklace and they have their mobile device. And they walk through, and then the glass case, through their headphones, they hear a voice.
Hey, come closer. I'm the display case related to Socrates and Simon the shoemaker.
So this is a prototype.
Unlock an emotion.
It's much better now, but...
Despicable, impetuous, godless. This is what Socrates has always been, always thinking about no one but himself. Well, he was executed, it's true, but he was asking for it.
So each emotion corresponds to a character.
Unlock an emotion.
And there is more to the sound. I'm just cutting it so you can...
Socrates was second to none. There will never be anyone like him. First of all, he was an excellent conversation partner. He always had something unexpected to tell you. He always managed to lead the conversation on the brightest paths.
So basically, the emotions that you touch are not your emotions, but they're the emotion that different characters who lived, who alive at the time of when Socrates lived, and it's their emotions towards him. So what we were trying to do through these short stories was to give visitors these multiple perspectives and have them compose a portrait of Socrates, and see that people back then were like us. They were passionate about one another in different ways, and people relate to us. When we evaluated this, we had a 14-year-old girl who came out really upset and mad that Socrates' wife was angry at him, and how dare her. So they really related to this emotional approach to someone who they hear, they know from the past, but they probably haven't ever thought that this person also had jealousy. There were jealousy sentiments towards him. There were admiration sentiments towards him, and so on. This, as I said, was our first attempt to put some kind of tangible element in our work, even a very simple one, because that basically what this was a way to choose. You could have just touched on a button on your mobile screen, but the playfulness of it made people really get more engaged. Extended reality now, much more sophisticated technology, allows us to do much more in that respect of tangibility and hybridity. Extended reality is a neologism coined as an umbrella term to encompass virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. Plus, I would add extending senses, and that's what we're trying to do at a project that I will show later on. But before that, let's go to another two sites that we worked with as part of the Emotive project. The Antonine Wall is an UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's the northernmost border of the Roman Empire, it was. And the display of some of its artifacts, some parts of the wall, and some objects from the Roman camps that were along the wall are displayed in the Hunterian Museum in Glasgow. As part of the University of Glasgow. The museum is a university museum. So here what we try to do is to combine immersive, mobile, and tangible in this interactive storytelling experience about a Caledonian slave named Verecunda, who of course existed because they found the tombstone. And it was unique that a slave had a tombstone. So they understood, researchers interpreted it as that she was a very important slave in the Roman commander's mansion or whatever camp. So she disappeared, and there's a fictional story that was created around this. So she disappeared, and the ring of the commander disappeared with her. So visitors, this is a group experience. They wear headsets in the gallery. They're introduced to this story, the fictional story, and then they take off their headsets and they choose, it's for 4 visitors, they choose one of the 4 characters, whichever one they want, and then they engage in this tour around the gallery with that character narrating their interpretation of why Verecunda disappeared. So you can go and do this experience again and choose one of the other characters, and you will hear again a different perspective about why the slave disappeared. And there's this mobile phone that is encased in this window. The window is a 3D printed replica of an object that was found on site and is exhibited in the museum in a glass case. So we created this window, and this is an augmented reality experience. So the story is said according to some of the objects that one can find and activities that one can do going around the gallery. It's not a very big space, but there are quite a few artifacts. And then at the end, you hear, or it's kind of left dangling, but you understand what the perspective of the person who was relating the story to you is. And then you have to, time is up, and you have to give your magic window before it completely breaks and loses power. Another very completely different site that we worked with was the Çatalhöyük site. It's a Neolithic site in Turkey. This is also an UNESCO World Heritage Site, but much, much older, 9,000 years old. It's very remotely located. It's very hard to get there, even though it's an UNESCO World Heritage Site. It has been excavated for many years by thousands of specialists, and what they found is that up to 8,000 people lived in this city. This was a city that had no roads and no sidewalks, so the houses were block houses that were built one on top of the other and one next to the other, and they would go in from the top. So it has a lot of interesting things that come with it, the streetless neighborhoods, et cetera, but we picked up on some interesting concepts, and we tried to create a storytelling experience, a very participatory one for a pair of visitors that picks up on this concept that they buried their dead under the floor of their home, and also the fact that their wall paintings and art and the figurines such as this reflected the community identities and the fact that this was an egalitarian society. So we tried to put these concepts in this virtual reality experience for 2 users. These users may be remotely located. They don't have to be in the same space like you see here. And what they do is they go among the reconstructed houses and they exchange objects, and they engage in a reflective discussion about their own traditions, because we did this with 100 users from various parts of the world, and they for the most part didn't know each other. So they exchange ideas about what they do when they bury their dead, and what they do with objects that belong to them. An egalitarian society is very hard for us to understand nowadays. And we also experimented with tangibility. We created these 3D replicas, 3D printed replicas of the objects, like the Mother Goddess figurine, and they could touch in real physical life what they saw through their virtual headset. So to conclude with the most recent project, where we're trying to bring all these concepts together, it's called Bridges, and this is an experience that's for multiple users, 4 to 5 users, who are co-located, and they interact in a room scale environment. So they move around in the room, usually with virtual reality equipment. You use a controller to move around, and you actually don't move your body, but you move the virtual environment. In this case, no controllers are needed. This is deviceless interaction. They can move their hands, they walk around, and they can touch each other. They're all represented by avatars in the space. And they can touch each other, they touch their avatars, and they feel the real person, but represented, let's say, as an ancient Greek guest into a house. So I'll show you a little bit of the video and talk over. This is installed right now, what you're seeing at the foundation of the Hellenic World, the Hellenic Cosmos Cultural Center, where the cave was set up back in the 90s. And the scenario in this story is that visitors are guests at the home of an ancient Athenian, in ancient Athens, potter. And his son is leaving for war, to go to the war. And the guests are there for a symposium, for a feast, for a celebration that the father is holding for the son to go to war. Of course, now this doesn't look really good because it's a feed from the monitor, but all these visitors are immersed and they interact. They choose what food they want to eat. They go up a virtual staircase. There's no real physical staircase, but they feel as if there is one. And they engage in various activities, and there's also smell. We have scents. barbecue, the smell of barbecue because, of course, they cooked food, and incense when they pray to the goddess that the fleet, the army that will go to Syracuse to invade Syracuse, and we all know what the outcome of that was. The Athenians lost very brutally that expedition. But in any case, this is, you engage, you take part in the family, and it's you with your other guests, real people, and the virtual characters of the family. So I'm just going to show this video and I'm done. Just so you can see, there's a tangible aspect as well. So we have 3D printed artifacts. At this point, only one, this vase. But the visitors don't know this, so we keep it as an element of surprise. So they're supposed to go and pray to Goddess Athena and do this, pour wine over the altar, which is something that the Athenians did in the house. So they're in this house, in the various parts of it. Sorry, let's go to the next one. And a little bit, it's just, this is the smell machine. Wow, it also has smells. So some of them did not perceive the smells, but some others did, and they... Hippias is one of the characters, so they're really engaged in their role-playing activity. From the top balcony of the house, you can see the Acropolis. And there's a little fan right up there that puts wind out. It was very brief.
Πρέπει να σας μυρίσει σας κάτι.
Ναι. Τι θα βάλετε, βάλετε καθένας από ένα.
Εγώ πάρω σου πια.
Ωραία.
Είναι σαν αυτό που βλέπεις στα παιδικά.
Συνεχίζω.
Ναι.
Πια. Μπείτε.
Παιδιά, κρέα, δεν πιστεύω.
And that's the machine in the back, squirting out scents. So...
Α, οκ. Α, τέλεια. Ωραία, ναι.
Τι να κάνω.
Ρίχνεις λίγο κρασί στο δάπεδο.
Α,
Στο βρωμό.
νομίζω δεν είναι έτσι. Στο βρωμό πρέπει να το κάνω.
So you can't see what they're seeing, but so on. So I'll go forward and finish with this. We evaluated this just a month or so ago with 73 visitors. And we're analyzing the data. Now we're looking into meaningful interaction, so dialogue and reflection, emotional engagement and historical empathy. This active approach to cognition that I mentioned before, this embodiment, they move around, they touch each other. We want to see how that affects their experience, the social collaborative nature of the experience, and all these other senses, the multiple senses that augment the representation, such as smell, wind, the tangible objects, and so on. So this is what we try to do, is that rather than showing this technology and what these technologies can do, we wish to focus on exploring the ways that immersive storytelling and presentation can shift from the mostly didactic walkthroughs of the 90s, 2000s, to experiences that are playful, that are emotive, social, shared, interactive, but in a meaningful sense, and ultimately relevant to those who they are designed for. And so they can resonate to their lives as they are today. Thank you.